Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Aceves, and we're starting a new episode of mindfitpodcast. And I have here with me Neil Babins. How you doing, Neil?
I'm doing very well. How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm very excited that we finally have a winner in this election, so that makes me feel better.
Yeah, as long as we have someone who also concedes,
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, no.
hopefully. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
yeah.
it's going to be a problem on January 20th.
I know. That's the thing is that there's probably more, as much different kind of anxiety now as there was watching the election results. In terms of what's going to
Mhm,
happen, how it's going to unfold, and whatnot, and But I think a lot of people are relieved. Everyone's relieved that it's over. I
mhm.
think that part is over. But Yeah, it's been very tense. It's been a very tense couple of weeks. I don't think people realize just how much. And
Mhm.
now there's the chill in the air. The winter chill is here. It's getting colder outside, so everybody's like going through all kinds of transitions. And yeah, we're having that surge in Utah and Nevada for COVID, so everybody's also getting a little bit more on edge. But changes in the air. Changes in
Mhm.
the air.
That's
Yeah.
for sure.
Hopefully,
So,
hopefully, good. Yeah.
yeah, I just think I always tell my clients that it's good to be healthy and take good care of themselves because whatever happens, if we are strong and we have stability in our minds, then whatever happens is not going to affect us as much, and so it'll be easier to get through it. So
Yeah,
hopefully,
they say
yeah.
that your health is more important than anything. Your current immunity is more important than anything else.
Mhm.
The way
Yeah,
you approach things as opposed to the actual virus out there. So
exactly. So,
yeah,
and today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what makes a good client and what could, make things better for you when you go to therapy or when you're trying to be coached by a life coach. What are some of the things that you can do to actually get more for your money, I guess, and
hmm
and also to, improve your life because that's the whole point of going to see someone, right? Is to try to
yeah.
improve your life. So, what's your take on this, Neil?
Well, that's the whole thing. Is that the platform that you come at something, whether it's a virus pandemic out there, your own personal health, or if you're going for therapy and you want to get some sort of help, life springing, or with an issue that you've been having. There is a way to approach the process. A therapist or a life coach, or going to see someone like yourself. There is a way to be that is usually more beneficial, more helpful for you. I don't find a lot of therapists really talk about this because when we say how to be a good client, it's like how to be a good student. But I think we're moving into an era of therapy and life coaching and life springing type of work that it is important to talk about, that people understand as clients when they can get the most, like you said, out of their sessions and out of their progress and growth, and out of their therapist and out of the experience. So sometimes you're going to be with the wrong therapist, and that's fair. You move on to somebody who you're more compatible with. But before you do that, there's a few things that I think are important that you understand that could maximize your experience and get past a few fallacies and a few things that we talk about. Believe it or not, I'll give you a few secrets that we talk about in supervision meetings while we're in training. When we talk about clients that we have and issues that we're having working with clients, a lot of the things that come up that I think are pretty common and I think would be helpful for clients to know before they come into sessions, that would help them get the most out of their therapy, and where they get stuck and where we get stuck with you, right?
Hmm.
Is sort of where I'm coming at it. Because if you maximize that, you can maximize your ability to get the most out of your sessions and understand what therapy is and what it isn't and what it ought not to be as it's becoming something new, because it's going really more than postmodern. It's going like neo postmodern already. And it's becoming more and more online, a little bit more abstract because it's not face to face. And also a lot more universal. More and more people are reaching out for it. It's becoming, well, I don't want to say hip, but kind of is. You know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
becoming the thing to go for some sort of life springing or self growth, whether it's therapy or something else. So I think it's important to know how to be a good client and what blocks you and blocks the therapist from helping you.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? When I say therapist, by the way, I mean everything you might be: a life coach, a social worker, working in meditation, or whatever you may be, whatever, even massage therapy, whatever kind of help you're going for. Um, so I don't know if you want me to start with just a couple of examples of categories of what I think could be problematic. and
Yeah,
that'll.
that would be helpful. The one thing I want to mention though before that
Mhm.
is I think it's important to when you're looking for help, right? Either life coach or all the therapist things that we mentioned. I think it's important to also look for someone that you can trust, someone that you feel has what you're looking for. So observation is really important. To observe what this person is doing. Are they grounded themselves? Because not most people think that because someone has a degree that suddenly that they're going to be able to help you, and I from what I've seen, that's not always the case. Also, sometimes it's about matching, like you said, with a person. Like, has to be someone that has what it takes to help you with your needs. So
Mhm.
finding the right therapist or the right life coach match is important. Same with a guru, by the way, means teacher in Hindu. And
Mhm.
so if you're looking for someone that is going to help you, make sure it's someone that aligns with your beliefs, that aligns with your mindset or the way that you think, because
Mhm.
that's going to be very important for later. And so the way I look at it is I want to see down the line in the future, what is this person doing? If it's someone who is doing drugs and doing all these things, doesn't match with me, for example, and so I'm not going to go with someone who does drugs, because there are some people who experiment with psychedelics, for example.
Mhm.
And so I'm not into that at all. And so I try to stay away from someone like that. But if you are, by all means, look for someone who can help you with that and tell you maybe what the right dosages are, or things like that. So it depends on you a lot of times. And also, if you think about this person, 10, 20 years from now, how is their life? Are they married? Do they have kids? Do they look happy? That's the biggest one for me. Like, I want to make sure that the person looks happy, that they're actually practicing what they're saying, because a lot of times, therapists or gurus, they talk about a lot of things, but sometimes they don't even practice it themselves. And so sort of like going to someone, if you're looking for to lose weight, for example, and the person that's going to help you is overweight, maybe they're not applying their practices as much. And so you want to look for someone who's actually practicing what they're preaching, and that looks, like I said, like it aligns with your beliefs and the way you feel is important to you. So that's the first thing I would do before any we get into anything. So now go
Mhm.
ahead and say what's the categories you have set up.
Okay. I think the most important thing is to build a rapport, to have a
Hmm.
rapport, to feel comfortable with somebody. Comfort, not the kind of comfort that you have when you're not growing, because
Hmm.
growth takes discomfort, and there's going to be some discomfort. And I think that's the main point to counter, not to counter, but to piggyback and counter on what you're saying, because there is one category of person that you make me think of when you talk about, and that's the client called the shopper. The shopper is the person who wants to grow, but is really afraid of growth. So, what they do is they look for somebody who has their beliefs, as you said, who is compatible with them, who isn't going to be a threat to them. Now, therapy, at least in terms of therapy, is a little bit intimidating because it can pose a threat in terms of discomfort. So you're
Hmm.
not looking for somebody who matches you in that regard because that's too safe. Trust is about trusting that you could be uncomfortable with somebody and you're safe with that discomfort. So if you're looking for somebody who matches you in terms of not going to challenge you or not going to intimidate or not going to tell you what you don't want to hear, then that's the wrong therapist for you. Okay, you want someone who's going to be able to make you be uncomfortable because trust me, if you're going to grow, you're going to be uncomfortable. So that's the one thing I can say about that I think is important. The first thing to look for is that that person is licensed. Yes, they have a degree, but are they licensed? Check the board that they work under. Are they registered there? And when does their license expire? And you don't have to check. I don't personally don't think it's important where they studied, but do they have a degree and are they licensed? The second thing is, do you have a rapport with them? Do you like them? Do you feel comfortable enough to work with them, right? So that the shopper is somebody who goes in, has a little interview, takes notes, and pretends that they're like looking through profiles to pick a therapist or anybody that is going to help them grow. But there's already a defense mechanism going on there because they're looking for somebody who's not going to challenge them in a way that they're afraid to be challenged. So just be careful of that. It's not always true when you're looking for the right therapist, but be aware of yourself as a client coming in that that's what you're not doing. Because if that's what you're doing, you're already defeating the purpose. And you already come into my session with a preconceived notion that I have to show up for you in a certain kind of a way. And that's the second kind of client I call the weaver. The weaver is trying to make the therapist into what they want them to be. I like to work in DBT. I've read a lot about DBT and I think it's very helpful for me. And I found it very helpful in the past. And I'd like to do DBT. Do you do DBT? It's like, I'm not here to remodel your kitchen. I'm here to work with you as a human being and look for areas that you might grow within. So I could do DBT, for example. I'm not certified in it, but let's talk first. Let's get acquainted. And through our conversation, let's find out what's going to work best for you in the session. Don't come in with like, I like to work with cognitive behavioral therapy, or I'd like to hire a therapist or work with a therapist that's going to walk me through narrative therapy or this kind of therapy or that kind of work. I've done it before with my husband and I found it very helpful. That's defeating the purpose as well. That's called the weaver, somebody who wants to make you into something that matches them, which keeps them comfortable. So the idea is if you're doing something to keep yourself comfortable, which is different than trust, like you brought up earlier, then just be aware that that could be something that we would bring up in a supervision meeting, right? And I'm not giving you that secret to make anyone feel uncomfortable, but I'm saying it so that they understand how their process can be so much better when they come into therapy. And that can save you a lot of money because the first few sessions are often about building rapport and trying to break down those initial barriers. If you're a weaver or a shopper, I'm trying to bring you down and grounded so that you understand that this is going to be difficult at times, but that's why you could trust me. And I guess the third thing I could say, I'll hand it back to you, is that yeah, you want a person who seems to be basically someone who's grounded and has arrived at a certain place you'd like to go, but no one is going to be that perfect guru. If you're looking for a mentor who is, a shining example of what it is to be a human being, I think one of the things that is very relaxing for people or builds trust is knowing that their therapist is very human and has not only been through a lot, but is still going through their own processes and
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily have a perfect life. Yes, has it together, like you said, but at the same time has idiosyncrasies, strengths and weaknesses, goes through their own process of being human. If somebody is up on a pedestal to you, I'm not sure it's gonna serve you because that's not true. Any therapist who's trying to create that veneer is coming from their own defense mechanism, putting you into a category where you're already at a disadvantage because you're looking up to them. So you're looking at what you'd like to be in somebody else who's actually not that. So you're creating an illusion. You want to deal with another human being who is just look at it as a very intelligent human being who's trained in where you want to go,
Mhm.
and how you want to get there. So yeah, those are a few of them that I have. I
Yeah.
have more, but yeah, go
I
ahead.
think to me personally, I feel like to counter some of the stuff you just mentioned, I feel like it's important to see what I would call credibility, right? So some people, go to places and they try things out and they have amazing experiences, and then this place could be someone like a life coach. A lot of life coaches don't really have licenses or they're certified. They're just people
Sure.
that are doing really well in life and they just decided that they want to help other people get there.
They don't
And
need them. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that was one of the things that life coaching started with through positive psychology. It was positive
Mhm.
psychology. It started this whole thing about how you can help your fellow human beings through experience and focusing on the positive things about life and doing things like that. So and there are certain people that really just motivate you and do that for you. And so again, if somebody has proven themselves through your friends or come to you and they've had amazing experiences, then it's if it sounds like something that resonates with you and then you try it and it works for you, I think that's really important to focus on the things that work and that you feel can work for you, because that is going to have a huge impact on your therapy. Now if you're going to try something new completely that you've never tried before, I mean, I think it's important to be open-minded and to try it, but always look at the results, right? If it's working, by all means, continue doing that. But if it's not working for you, or you don't feel the rapport and all the things you mentioned, then yeah, just I think it's important to realize that and look for another therapist. and or some other form of, I mean, 'cause there's so many alternatives out there. So I don't feel like you should be stuck to one thing or try to make sure that this works because they told you this was going to work. I mean, it's important to be open minded and flexible, and look for, again, the results, right? And so, and again, going back to credibility, yes, I think sometimes, yes, it is very important to make sure that they are licensed and that they have certain things.
Oh, if they're
But
therapists, yeah,
right, well,
for
if
sure.
they're a therapist, yeah.
Yeah.
And but again, even with that, I've personally have met quite a few people who have PhDs or PsyDs, and they're not the best therapists,
To
you
say
know.
the least.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah. No, no,
there's
no.
all kinds.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. High
Yeah.
five.
And there are
Yeah,
people who have no degrees at all, and they're just unbelievable. They change your life with one session. I've
that's true.
experienced that as well.
That's
And
true. Yeah.
it's, again,
Yeah.
there's so many things out there. For example, I'm going to share a story. When I was in school, I met this psychologist who was Latina, and she was starting to recommend people to go to a curandero, which is like a healer, right? Like a spiritual healer, like a shaman type of thing. And the reason being is because she realized that a lot of Latinos feel and believe more a curandero than a therapist. And there's a whole research on this now that some of the people that I work with have actually done, and they found that beliefs are very strong. And if people believe more that a shaman is going to heal them more than a therapist, that's going to be the truth, because that's what their
Mhm.
beliefs are, and that's what's going to make them, what's going to work for them. And so you don't want to recommend someone to a therapist if you know that they believe in that they're being that there's a hoax on them or some spell that's making them sick. And so you want to take them to where they need to go. If they're religious, maybe they need an exorcism and things like that. So it depends on the
Mhm.
person, and you want to look at what their belief system is, and that is going to be, and same as you as a client, if you're listening, whatever works for you. I think it's important to acknowledge and to go with that, right?
Yeah. It is important to go with what you. The important thing is that if you're going to see a therapist or somebody else, just make sure that they're not misrepresenting themselves.
Hmm.
That's what I could say. Because they have a PhD doesn't mean that they're qualified or good. Trust me on this one. Um, yeah, but just make sure they're not misrepresenting themselves. If they call themselves a psychotherapist, they must be licensed. If they call themselves, shaman, then whatever the certifications are. But also, it's important to understand from what you're saying that different disciplines do different things. You arrive where you want to arrive, but if you go to somebody where, like you were just mentioning, or a life coach, or a therapist, or somebody else, another spiritual healer, you you're approaching a different discipline. It comes at it from a different place. So it's not that there's one that's right or one that's wrong, but they are different disciplines. So because you arrive at a result where you feel clear, that is great, and that is the ultimate for yourself, and that is your choice to make. But they do different things that come from different places. So to say one replaces the other, perhaps subjectively for you it does, but it doesn't mean that you're accomplishing necessarily the same thing. You're accomplishing what you want to accomplish, and that's perfectly okay. But you're not necessarily getting the same thing done as going to another kind of professional. So it's not necessarily the same result. It's the same result in terms of your subjective experience of it, and that's the important thing, right? But you're getting something different done. It brings up another client type that you call when you said this isn't working for me. In therapy, that's called the dodger. The dodger is somebody who says this isn't working after a few sessions and leaves. And typically, what's going on, yeah, there could be a lack of rapport with the therapist. This could not be working. You could not like the therapist approach. You hear a lot of stories about that. Legitimately, that could be the case. But if it's a
Hmm.
pattern for you, if you dodge after a few sessions saying that person wasn't right for me, that could also be a defense mechanism where you're actually not really wanting to get to the depth of the work. And you're using the therapist as the excuse to not wanting to continue with them. This isn't working for me. I'm not seeing results. You're not going to see results after 3 sessions. You're going to see change perhaps start to happen. Yes, you might see some sort of epiphany happening. I do have people who change quickly, but not always. Sometimes you could be talking to me for 2 years and, until you start to have that aha moment. So change is different for everybody. Everybody changes in their own way. And if you're not changing in the first couple of sessions and you dodge, you might want to consider that doing that too soon isn't because the therapist wasn't helping you. It depends, right? And it is a fine line. Sometimes there, things are going on in session that shouldn't be happening. I hear a lot of people say, my last therapist did this. I'm like, they did what? So I'm like, wow, okay. I don't report other therapists, but I'm like, that's okay. Well, all right. So sometimes yes, but you have to be able to know what is what, because there are dodgers out there and people do that. And um, another category I can call is someone called the deflector, who no matter what we say to you, there's a story about why that won't work, or why that's not what's going on with you, why that's not the issue. You know what your issue is, and this is my issue. And that's a defense mechanism. That's keeping it tight and neat so that you don't have me go anywhere else, that your parts of you are afraid for me to go. So you're deflecting every intervention or every suggestion and staying stubbornly or rigidly within that issue that you're absolutely certain is the issue, right? Rather than being open. Now that takes time sometimes to break down. I'm not blaming anybody or judging
Mhm.
anyone for being that way. I'm simply saying it could help you to know that that might be you, and just take a look. There's also someone that I think I should bring up called the how to. But how do I fix that? But what do I do? Like, do you have a worksheet I could work, or a workshop I can? Is there, like, what do I do with that? And the idea of what to do with that is that's exactly that's a good question. I always say that's a great question. What do you do with that? Handing self agency back to a client is sometimes very frustrating for them because they realize they have to do the work, and I'm
Mhm.
not going to give them the answers. And there's not a how to. It's not like when I see a doctor. I've got a rash on my arm. Well, here's cream. Put this on twice a day. It'll go away. It doesn't work like that. Not in therapy, right? There's no how to. Um, there might be in other forms, with meditation, there's a how to through guided meditation. There might be more of a structure and how to do the exercise. Could I give you exercises? Yeah, there's a few things I could have you try to do, but you've got to do them, right? So it's not a how to. And people who are very how to can find themselves getting depleted and frustrated with the process very fast. So that was another group I wanted to bring up. And I guess there's one more that I could bring up called the Ferris wheel syndrome. The Ferris wheel syndrome is the kind of person who stays on the same story every single time you're in session. You're going to tell the same story over and over again. Now, sometimes that's necessary for you to
Mhm.
get to realize that you're telling a story, that you're on a Ferris wheel. Sometimes people after 6 months, like, I've been on this thing for 6 months, right? I'm like, yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for listening for 6 months. You're welcome. That's what I'm here to do. But you have been on a Ferris wheel for 6 months. Every time we seem to be making some growth, boom, you go back to your old pattern. Now, there could be a lot of diagnostic reasons for that as well, but that's my job, not yours as a client. Don't worry. That's another thing I can say. Please don't worry about diagnostics. Stop Googling yourself. Stop reading non-evidence based websites about what you might have and come in and say, I've got PTSD complex. I've also got generalized anxiety disorder. I know this from Google. I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, already we're going to have to press the reset button. What I tell people, don't worry about the diagnostics. Let's talk about you. Right. So that's something else I think would be very helpful, is to not Google yourself, and don't overthink it. Just come in with what you want to talk about, what's going on with you, and I'll have you figure out how to figure out what to do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to mention, all the stuff you mentioned is I've experienced as well, and one of the things that I think it's important as a client too is to take responsibility for your life, right? And so there are things that you can do during the week that will make it better when you come back to your session, right? So for example, I tell people to exercise every day. At least 30 minutes a day can really make a huge difference in your life and your happiness levels. Also eating healthier and meditating, of course, spending 30 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, just in silence. And if you pray. If whatever thing you do to find inner peace can help you, and this that the practice of these things every day is what really can make a difference. And so the reason being, like I said at the beginning, when you go to your session and you want to take advantage of it and take more out of it than possible, right? Is if you're happier and you come to me now, we can talk about other things other than your problems. Maybe we can talk about how to improve your life and make it better, and how you're doing with your exercise and how you're doing with your meditations. Like, we can go deeper in your meditation and go into finding out things about you that you didn't know, and abilities that you can create or learn, or things that you've never thought of, because now your mind is clear and you're not worried about these things. Which brings me to another point that for some people that think, oh, therapy is not for me, or I don't need a life coach. I can tell you this: most people can benefit from, even from therapy or from a life coach, if they don't have any problems. On the contrary, if you don't have any problems, you can benefit more, because now you have another set of eyes, another mind that can listen to you, which is a big
Mhm.
thing. You can also share your ideas and think about your goals and things like that, and maybe come up with a plan, or make things better in your life, because the truth is, you can always be better. Sometimes the problem is we get stuck, and we just go to work and do certain things that are very repetitive. But when you have a second set of eyes, then they can maybe give you an idea, or stimulate you, or help you grow. And that's what a coach does. Like, if you think about coaching, someone who plays basketball, they're already really good at basketball and they play really well, but a coach can tell them, hey, if you change this or you do that, maybe you're going to
Mhm.
get better at this, and maybe you can become even better, a better player. And that's what
Mhm.
it's all about. Same with therapy. If you go to therapy, maybe you're doing certain things, but if you're at home on your own, a lot of times it's harder to realize these things. But if you have somebody there, and you go and you show up every week, then you start seeing patterns, and you start
Yeah.
realizing things. Like, to give you an example, I have a client that comes every week, and sometimes he just says, just coming here keeps me accountable. And I don't tell him anything, I don't try to keep him accountable, but in his mind he says, I feel like I have to come to you and show you some results. I have to show you some of the things that I've done this week. And I feel like that's true. Like, that is one of the benefits of having a life coach, or a guru, or somebody there to show you the way, and help you improve your life. And so keep that in mind, that I think everyone can benefit from having someone next to them, showing them the way, or just listening alone. Sometimes just listening alone can make a huge difference, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the big difference now is that the stigma's going away, because people would often say, I don't need therapy, or there's a stigma about needing therapy or being in therapy. And I know I said earlier that it's becoming hip to be in therapy, but really what that means is that people are saying, I want therapy, or I want life coaching. I don't need it. In other words, there's something I notice all my friends going, or a lot of people going, and they're getting breakthroughs from it. And I just want to see if there's something where I am stuck and I don't know that I'm stuck.
Hmm.
So it's not a question of you need it, like something is wrong. It could be a question of, wow, I never realized that I lived my life based on those memories that keep me stuck, or that belief about myself or the world that keeps me stuck. I never even realized that I was living in that kind of a pattern. And it's your choice. It's not that it was bad, it's just your choice. Do you want to stay in that paradigm, or do you want to expand? It's always something to explore. And that's what I was going to say, is one group of clients that come in, I call them the flatliners. They come in and they just sort of stare, and they just wait for me to say something, and they don't bring anything to the session. And some of them have the opposite issue. They say, I don't know what to talk about today. I know I should bring something to session. I'm like, well, that in itself is bringing something to session, that you think you need to have something to talk about to fill the space, right? There's always something. And whatever you bring up, wherever you go, if I just sit there and say, so how was your week? Because that's essentially what I do. I hand it back to them. Whatever like, I can't think of what to say. I can't think of what to say. So some of them say nothing. And that in itself is exactly what would be examined, right? The fact that you say nothing until something's said to you.
Hmm.
What's going on with that? What is that a pattern for you? Is there something that you don't feel you could say something to someone who's supposedly an expert? Because I'm not an expert in your life. I'm an expert in psychology, but not in your life. And there's a difference there. So the flatliner is somebody who just comes in and there's a flat line until I give it some energy, and not because I don't want to work. Makes me have a lot of therapists joke, well, it makes my job easier when the person talks all through session, right? That's someone else. It's just talks all through session, you know, chats all the way through it, and you get no word in edgewise. The joke is that it makes our job easier. We're joking because when there's a flatliner and says nothing, they want you to do all the work. Is another defense mechanism. I'm not going to say anything until you give me permission to say something, until you guide me. Like, well, maybe that's the issue. right? Maybe that's part of the issue, right? So it's a mirror. So that's not being a bad client. I'm just saying if you're a flatliner and you recognize that you are, maybe you could bring that up. I notice I don't say anything until you do. I notice that too. Let's talk about that, right? So that's something else. Whoever you're being in session could tell you a lot about where you might want to go or what might be happening in the rest of your life as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
finally, I think the last thing, and this is why I think it's important to, do all the steps that we mentioned, is to think of, committing to this therapy, because sometimes, one time or two times it could help, but sometimes we need longer than that. Some changes take time, and
Yep.
sometimes we got to work on that and practice it. And yes, sometimes we fall and it hurts, and things, like you said, can be uncomfortable sometimes, but the idea is to get through that. And that's why I think it's important to have somebody that has all the characteristics and the traits that I mentioned earlier, because that they're going to take you in the right place, in the right direction. And even though it might hurt, you have someone that can get you there. And there's really no way to get around the pain. Sometimes you have to just get through it and feel it and experience it, and then at the end you come out like a butterfly, right? You go through the cocoon thing, and then the final result is really what matters. and
Yeah.
and there's always room for improvement, always, and there's things you can do to get better. So as long as, again, you found someone that you feel is helping you,
Hmm.
that's gold for me. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, and commit to that, and always work on yourself, even if you're
Hmm.
not with your therapist. That's what makes you a better client, because then when you come back, you already have improvements, you already have something to show for it, and the person helping you is just going to do more for you. I'll give you a story. One of my uncles is a doctor, and he said that a lot of times, like 80 or 90% of the time, people don't follow what he says, and then they come back to him and they're like, well, I'm still sick, I'm still not getting better. And he's like, well, how am I going to give you something else if you haven't even tried the first thing I told you to try? And
Right.
so it's important to follow directions, and listen to the person that's trying to help you, because they, like you said, they know their things. And a lot of times, the problems that we have are because we are not doing something we should be doing. So
Right.
the
Right.
answers are always in front of us, and if we listen and pay attention, chances are
Yeah.
we're going to get better. So.
Yeah. And therapists of all kinds have defense mechanisms too. A lot of therapists that I know, because you mentioned doesn't mean necessarily they're qualified. You're right. Some of them have an agenda. Some of them have an approach that is very honed and very specific, and they'll always do a one size fits all.
Mhm.
And those are perhaps therapists I just want to caution you about. That doesn't mean, and I'm not saying they're not qualified. I'm not saying they're not good at what they do. And I'm not saying you can't get results if you don't follow them. But some of them come at you as if you're just another statistic within their approach. So everybody falls into their approach, right? And that may or may not fit with where you're at right now. It's not that the diet doesn't work, but the diet might not be the right diet for you, right? So if you follow it, you'll lose weight, but that's not the point, right?
Mhm.
So just be careful of that also. Therapists who have their way of working, but you're not the person beside you. You're an individual, and a therapist who doesn't know how to work with individuals where you're at and how you're there, where you're being at when you're there, i would just I would just throw that out there as something to, if you're going to shop, if you're going to be the shopper, be aware of that. Somebody who comes at it with one size fits all, it doesn't fit all.
Okay. Sounds
Yeah.
good. Any last words before we end today's podcast?
No, just yeah, I would say just understand that how you approach your growth is just as important as the growth itself.
Mhm.
And yeah, like we said earlier, there's going to be some discomfort with growth, so be aware of that as well. And don't blame your therapist if it's if it feels uncomfortable, because that's what they're supposed to be guiding you toward. Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for your time, Neil. And remember, we're here every Tuesday at 6 p.m. If you have any questions, you can follow us on social media. Just look for MindFit Podcast. We are also on YouTube, so you can actually watch this video on YouTube, and leave a comment if you want. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to whatever platform you listen to this podcast. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you to all the people who've been donating as well. We really appreciate that, and we'll see you next Tuesday, 6 p.m.
All right. See
Thanks.
you next Tuesday.
All right.
All right. Bye
Bye.
bye.
This podcast is brought to you by MindFit. Please help us to share this podcast with your friends and family to grow this community. And if you'd like to donate to this podcast, or if you'd like to share your comments, questions, or concerns, send them to mindfitpodcast@gmail.com, or you can call us directly at 714-328-4661.